Who the hell are you?
You know. You all know exactly who I am. I'm the cook. I'm the man who killed Gus Fring. Now, say my name.
Heisenberg.
You're goddamn right.
The Cinik Radio Podcast.
Hi, I'm Chad L. Coleman, Tyrese from The Walking Dead, and Cuddy from The Wire, and you are listening to the Cinik Radio Podcast. Here your host, Cinik.
Hey, the facts are Spider-Man belongs in the MCU. Sony was delusional thinking they didn't need Marvel, and now he's back. And we, the fans, are 100% proudly responsible for that.
Igrihe.
As long as DC wants to make dark and gritty movies, they're going to lag behind Marvel in every category.
And Ryan.
Batman vs. Superman is objectively better than Infinity War.
IG, did we just forget Kim?
You guys completely suck.
This is the greatest show of all time.
Batman's rogue gallery of villains has always been hands down the most impressive of any superheroes, with an honorable mention going to Spider-Man. On this week, episode 123 of the Cinik Radio Podcast, we find out where the crime prince of crime got his scars. Well, at least the emotional ones. I'm your host, Cinik, and with me as always, my Legion of Dune, Igrihe, Ryan, and Kim. And we get the honor of reviewing the origin story of arguably the Michael Jordan of all villains, the Joker. Getting into the more finer details later in the show, let's talk about the origin, at least the way it's been played out. With the exception of Heath Ledger's Joker, IG, it's always been pretty much the same. A fall into some chemicals, and presto changeo, we have a supervillain. Renee Brinkley Hansen from Facebook wants to know, did the decision they took in the movie to go with more abuse and mental illness make slightly more sense than previous attempts to explain what made the Joker?
I think it really did, because if you look at what our generation's greatest Joker is, which is Heath Ledger's Joker, he really looks like a person and acts like a person with like severe schizophrenia and mental illness and things going on, because he's just like all over the place, very manic in how he behaves and everything goes on. So he's the only one that we have that doesn't have the falling into the vat of something origin story. And now it may exist for him, but I think the falling into the vat is more of a mutation type thing that puts the smile on and everything else. And this one, just like the Christopher Nolan Joker, is more makeup and prosthetic, and like the Christopher Nolan one is a cut on both sides of his face to create kind of a permanent smile. And this one is just pure clown makeup and a disorder that causes him to laugh. I like where it went with it. And do we need a superpowered Joker? We get away from superpowered things in both of the Jokers, and we get both of the last two Jokers don't have anything with a chemical or anything else other than maybe some of their crimes that they commit. But it's really all about how do they behave, and it's more manic. And it's even the third highest rated one of all time, which is Mark Hamill's, is more jokey than either of these two are. But you know, this, if you're going to go dark and gritty, I guess this is the way to go. It was pretty good performance, but yeah, I kind of like the way they went with it, and it kind of gave maybe people a new fresh look at mental illness, which quite honestly maybe is needed.
Kim, you're our resident comic book expert. Have we ever really got any context in the comics to what makes the Joker?
There has been, but to play devil's advocate on something he said with there not being chemicals, there is, but it comes in pill form. And so my overall theory on this is, you know, later I'm sure we'll get into the mother Joker relationship, but what if he's not actually crazy and it's just a chemical dependency on these medications that he's been taking or being told he has to take?
Quite possibly. Todd Phillips has quietly become Hollywood's heavyweight, with a hand in writing or directing movies like The Hangovers, Due Date, Old School, and War Dogs. If you're a studio with a script that kind of has a dark overtone with a little bit of comedy in it, is this the guy you're seeking out?
I guess. You know, I mean, he's done a solid job with his own kind of filmography so far. And, you know, yeah, between the Joker and Hangover, he shows a great deal of range. Well, I think at times this might have been a little self-indulgent. I think he, you know, nonetheless does a really great job. And he is the type of person who can kind of take that, you know, make it slightly darker and kind of the twisted humor. And yeah, I mean, definitely I'll watch anything, you know, by him at this point, especially something that does kind of have that darker tone infused with some of the comedy.
Yeah, his stuff was always a little off. Like the Hangovers are very dark. Due Date is very dark, but this was definitely a change in direction for him where, you know, there was violence and there was anger and there was insanity and there was very little humor throughout the movie to be found. Like when I was looking through the list of questions, I'm like, there's not that many funny parts, or there's not much of this movie that you can make fun of and make light of. I really think he showed a different side because he is credited with writing this as well as directing it. So I think he did an amazing job pivoting from what he's been doing and doing something else. Kim, I tend to dislike movies that are solo focused and the same actor is on the screen in every scene, but Joaquin Phoenix's performance was captivating. But by the end of the movie, were you suffering from fleck fatigue? Did he do just enough to keep you interested?
I did not feel fleck fatigue at all throughout this movie. I really thought I was going to. I'm not usually one for origin stories as they are. The way it was performed, the way that he, you know, portrayed the character, the way he acted in general, I just thought was brilliant. There was an article I read online, I think it was a BuzzFeed thing, where they were talking about he actually went to a mental institution and sat with people for extended periods of time, several hours at a time, with individuals that had this uncontrollable laughter disorder, just to pick up on their mannerisms and how they would clench their face and, you know, how they would shake their hands and things like. There was a lot of effort and energy put into it. And the entire thing, you know, runtime being a little over a couple hours, but I never got bored with it. I never felt tired watching it. I absolutely just, it was well done.
Now that you mention it, I do like that because I'm one of those people that can't sneeze once. I sneeze about 15 times. And after a while, it begins to hurt. And anything that happens to your body that you're not in control of, it's kind of like spasmodic. Yeah, I don't know if that's a word or not, but it looked like the laughing hurt him after a while. Like it was so violent and so impulsive and so uncontrollable that it hurt him. And I like the fact that he acted that out and it wasn't just him randomly laughing with no consequence to it. Ryan, the pre-movie hype of fear and violence in the theaters leading to the opening weekend had the talking heads on the news warning everybody there's chatter on the dark web and they dispatch plainclothes detectives to the theaters. Does buzz like that anymore help or hurt a movie?
I feel like it helps because it brings a lot of attention to the movie. And, you know, I think there was already a lot of hype behind, I think it was at the Venice Film Festival where it did really well. The initial reviews were really good. I know that they were kind of tempered a little bit closer to release. But then when you do have that, I think it's one of those things where everybody was talking about it. In some ways, I'm sure it helped and hurt, but, you know, but in some ways, I'm sure it helped. But then I guess anecdotally, I knew at least 3 people today I talked to, all of whom were not interested because they either thought it was going to be too dark or that they thought that they kind of bought into the hype of it kind of catering to, I guess, aspects of our society that we're kind of grappling with right now. And I think that hype, maybe it did hurt it because, you know, I think there was this narrative that it was kind of speaking directly to, you know, the loner incel, you know, who's going to go try to shoot up a movie theater. And I really didn't see that at all. Like if that never came up, I never would have got that out of this movie. So, you know, I think obviously, you know, like no publicity is bad publicity. So in that way, it probably didn't hurt because of all the extra attention it got. Yeah, I think it was just unnecessary. And really, after watching the movie, I felt it was like that was the most ridiculous thing ever.
Well, as a side note, the Joker made $248 million worldwide, which in the States, I believe it made 90, and it's the biggest October opening ever. So I have a feeling that the buzz around the movie probably helped it, because if you were set on seeing it, I don't think there was anything that was going to stop you from seeing it. And it might have got people interested that maybe shouldn't even have been in the theater, because I have seen some things where people were triggered and they got up and walked out. And I can tell you one thing, I was in a theater with about 100 people. And people didn't even leave to go to the bathroom. That's how captivated they were by this performance and where they wanted to see the direction of this movie go. I have a feeling that it probably helped it. IG, The Joker was definitely a film festival darling, as the pre-reviews were off the charts. However, now that it's reached the common theater goer and the angry critics, we've seen the Rotten Tomatoes score drop a little bit. One of the biggest complaints I've seen on the net so far about the movie was pacing. Do you think this type of story needed to take its time to tell it, or could they have trimmed some of the fat and moved it along?
And I'm going to agree with that. I've seen the movie. I did enjoy it, but it did have some pacing issues. And I think some of it really worked in its favor of making it a little uncomfortable at times where you should feel a little uncomfortable, but some of it they really needed to trim down. They've really gotten into this whole mode of every movie needs to exceed 2 hours, and everything doesn't. It's okay to do an hour and 45 minutes of solid stuff, and really just trimming 15, 20 minutes off of this could have possibly made it. Like I said, I'm probably going to give it around an 8, but it probably could have gone up.
Time. You kill the suspense.
Yeah,
bastard.
Late. Bastard.
Well, show's over.
I've got to say, I disagree. I think that this was telling a unique story. And I think I would agree that most of the comic book movies can be trimmed by at least 10, 15, 20 minutes, maybe even a half hour for some of these. But in this case, when the movie ended, I was kind of shocked that it was over so quickly. It really didn't, even though, it takes its time with the character and with certain scenes. It never feels like it's too long. It never felt to me like they were wasting time. I think it's a character study, and it's about this guy's descent into madness. And I think the reality is that's really all the movie is. I think there was this part of me that was expecting him to be the Joker, and for him to be the agent of chaos, and for him, that maybe, I think, by trailers and early things, we thought, okay, maybe there's some kind of a riot or a civil unrest against the elite, and that, maybe the Joker would lead that. And then maybe that's what the kind of controversy would be, is that it leads to mass killings. And, so I think, if it was building to something like that, where he was actually the Joker, for an extended part of the movie, kind of creating chaos, that'd be one thing, but that wasn't it. Kind of the climax is the moment that he makes that change, and that's it. With that in mind, I think it was important to take its time with the character and to give us those moments, because that really added context, and really, we start the movie with him medicated and wanting more, and so we needed to see how, all those little things that it was going to take for him to go over the edge and push him over the edge, and it needed to feel real and feel earned. So I think we really needed the 2 hours of that to get that, and that's, I think, what the movie was. It wasn't that again, him being the agent of chaos. It was him becoming that person.
In our defense, though, Ryan is a fanboy for DC stuff, so we have to take all this in context.
Yeah, I'm a Marvel girl, though, and I'm agreeing with him entirely. And, for DC wanting to completely rebrand, their DCU, this was a really good, solid foundation brick to put down first, because there's so many different avenues and alleys that can come off of this one movie, so many different directions that can, spawn off of just this one thing. And I think that in order to really kind of rebrand themselves, they needed to do something that was very solid. And I feel like this was it.
Well, and I think it was a step forward, and it might be a step in a different direction for them, because you go dark with Batman, I get it. You go dark with Suicide Squad, I get it. You go dark with Superman? Really? Go dark with Aquaman? I mean, I realize it's dark in the ocean, but Aquaman has always been a bright and vibrant character. And it's sad that the best version of Superman was probably Homelander from The Boys. That being said, IG, Travis Bickle was definitely Arthur Fleck's spirit animal. Short of a mohawk or a few, are you talking to me? Did you sense the 1976 hit movie Taxi Driver's influence all over this, maybe with a hint of Fight Club? Because not only in the main characters, but the motivation and even a little bit in the setting.
Well, in the setting and the look and the lighting and the color palettes and just the way that Fleck was acting, all of it screamed Taxi Driver all over the place. And it's a good place. If you're going to steal, at least steal something good. And, quite honestly, Taxi Driver is one of the best movies Scorsese ever made, even though he didn't win much for it. It stood the test of time. It's a great film. So if you're going to put something in that era, why not Taxi Driver? And we all know that Gotham is basically a mix between Chicago and New York City, and that's what we're put in here. And it's really kind of fun to see it, but at the same time, I don't know what other direction you would go with a Joker origin story than to kind of put him in one of those situations where you're just kind of put down and beat up and knocked around and you have a mental illness. I mean, if you're not going to go drop them in a vat of chemicals, then I guess drop them in a vat of New York will do it, because that would turn most people crazy. Hence Ryan's belief that DC is better than Marvel, but whatever.
Ryan, retort?
I don't have much of a retort to that. I don't know.
All right. Well, another puzzling complaint was the charge that this movie glamorized mental illness, which I fully agree with. Sort of like how the Titanic glamorized drowning. Kim, what is it about shining a light on someone who's so far gone and so dangerous that's so unsettling to people? But we can watch Keanu Reeves and John Wick kill 500 people with a paperclip without batting an eye.
It's absolutely a stigma to mental illness. And I think sometimes people just don't feel comfortable discussing awkward or difficult topics and things that they're not comfortable with. And even though this is a fictional character, it's still very much a real thing. It's an individual who was a product of, poor upbringing, abandoned by the system, completely left to his own devices, and unfortunately was not mentally strong enough in order to pull himself out of the darkness he found himself in. That's a real problem. That is happening now. That is a huge issue in society. It's happening with veterans, with PTSD, and homeless people that are on the streets, and people that are going in schools and shooting them up. Maybe the perspective of it was taken in a negative context, but the fact that it's now out in the open and people are openly talking about this, I think, is a good thing, because it's making it more common to discuss it, and it's making it okay to bring it up in conversation, and it needs to be.
To piggyback on that, I think people need to relax a little bit with their criticisms on things like this. I think it was also a situation, I forget exactly what the disorder was, but that part of in Us, I think Lupita Nyong'o used, like, her voice was based on some kind of an issue, some disorder or problem that people have, and she said that that's where she got the voice, and people freaked out about that too. And it's like, the movie's not making fun of mental illness, and maybe it's not the greatest message that mentally ill people are capable of that, but at the end of the day, like, it's a movie, it's a story. We're trying to figure out how somebody gets to that point, and that's one of the ways someone gets to that point. And so I think people need to relax on that kind of thing. I think it's worse if you're making fun of it, or that to me kind of creates that the stigma, but it's not. It's like,
right, people want to talk about it whenever somebody actually commits a crime or goes out and shoots up or blows up a place. Everyone wants to talk about it then, but nobody wants to talk about how to prevent it from happening now.
And for what it's worth, the movie, I think, handles it well. It's like, there's a situation where the medical situation where he's on it, and I mean, he's at least going to therapy and seems to be managing all right. And then they cut all that off, and that's one of the many kind of steps, but at the end of the day, it's like the cutting off of that and the loss of that support. That's what causes him to descend into madness. And so, if anything, it's saying, like, we need to support people better, because it's not like he was on the medication and everything's going great and he has all the support and he descended. It's like, no, he lost every bit of support he could have. So, I just think it's like, it's a movie. Shut up and watch it. And if you don't like it, then go away. It's, I don't know. I just get frustrated with this kind of, like, those critiques are just ridiculous.
If we look at it, it is really a decline in healthcare. It's declined all over the place. Even if you have insurance, you're not getting the best healthcare. This country has given up on treating the mentally ill. They just give them some pills and send them on their way. There used to be these large hospitals on large campuses that housed people that weren't fit for society. They may not have been criminals, and some of them were, but they weren't fit to be out roaming the streets. Now it's just like, well, it's up to you to take your medicine and nobody's going to monitor it and have a good day. And next thing you know, the guy's pushing somebody off a subway platform. It speaks to really my next question. And Ryan, I'm going to throw this to you because of what you almost went through with Amazon recently. They were going to move into your area and displace everybody that you knew, your whole neighborhood. We're all firmly entrenched in the middle class, whether it be upper or lower. And for the most part, our backgrounds are the same. We came from the same thing. But as we've gotten older, our piece of the pie has gotten smaller yearly, either through the rise of cost of everything or jobs simply not keeping up with the cost of living. Will we ever get to the point, at least in our lifetimes, where the masses will try to eat the rich, and is class warfare a possibility like we saw in Gotham?
That's a good question. So I'm going to kind of go to the second part first, just because one of the disappointments is that the movie didn't explore that a little bit more, because it kind of sets it up, the kind of class warfare. And I think, of the many issues in the movie that are relevant today, I think that's something that is relevant, because you're absolutely right. I think, what was it? Something came out today that like the richest 400 people in the country pay a lower tax rate than everybody else. It's just insane things that come out all the time about it's just the disparity between the haves and everybody else, is so great. And we're firmly entrenched in the middle class, and I think every year I feel a tighter squeeze, and it's like I think I do well, but it's like just you're priced out of things, the cost of living goes up, and if I'm struggling, what the hell are people who are lower class on the cusp of poverty dealing with? And so I think we are very close to that, as a country. And I think, I won't get political, but I think some of the political changes that have happened over the last few years is kind of a symptom of that. And that, we will reach a tipping point, because it's just the kind of wealth disparity in our own society is humongous. And I kind of wish that the movie found a way to explore it a little more. I get why it didn't, and I get that it kind of had to be a background thing, and it made sense for the character that wasn't a major story. But I kind of wish that there was a discussion of, because it is such a relevant thing in our society today.
In the same element, IG, we always got the version of Thomas Wayne being the savior of Gotham and a saint. But in the Joker, he's a bit of an elitist jerk. Do you think possibly Phillips and the Joker were playing off of the current political climate?
I think that's exactly what it is. Showing the elite, rich, and powerful, given an opportunity, will always kind of side on their own side. And that's kind of what it looked like to me with Thomas Wayne's actions and how he spoke to people. If you have somebody who comes to you like Fleck did, talking about, my mom says that you're my father and this and that and everything else, and you can see that there's something going on there, is your correct reaction to lose your mind and quote unquote poke the bear? Or would you maybe have a little bit of empathy at the moment and just try and slowly back away from the situation and say, I'll get you some help, buddy? And honestly, even if he paid for all kinds of help for Arthur, like, what would it cost Thomas Wayne? What would the end result be? Like, what would that hit his bank account? Like, it would be nothing. Like, for Thomas Wayne to build a whole building and get everything set up for treating all the mentally ill in Gotham and probably the whole of the United States, or whatever they call America in this universe, might be a drop in his bucket. And that's the problem, is we have all these ultra rich. And now some of them have signed pledges to give away half of their riches when they die. But, some of them are going to live another 50 years. So where's it going to go, and who's it actually going to help? And are they going to give it to charities that aren't very good with their money, and only 10 cents out of every dollar goes to helping anything? That's the problem, is they could do these things themselves, but they just turn the other cheek all the time, and they just walk away from the problem or talk down to people when they actually get confronted. So it's really a problem, because you see this, and Thomas Wayne's always been a sympathetic character until now, and I have no sympathy for the Wayne family in this particular instance.
Well, to be fair, in that instance, I mean, he did gorilla choke the butler and jam his fingers in his son's mouth. So I could understand him being a little upset. But overall, like, his defense of the three guys that were killed on the subway, and the way he treated Arthur when he approached him, rather than, like you said, here, son, I'll give you some help. Here's my card. We'll work this out. I understand that your mom's touched, but I'll do what I can to help her. Instead it was sock him in the nose. So I didn't like the portrayal of Thomas Wayne in this movie, but it was fitting for the background that they were trying to make. Ryan, fired from his job and in a tailspin, Arthur took a subway ride when the three bros began to harass a woman, pelting her with fries, and then began to beat on Arthur for laughing, causing him to pull a gun and begin shooting. As a Big Apple resident, tell me your subway survival guide.
Now the subway survival guide is more about, like, don't get in an empty, if there's a train that passes by where, like, most of the cars seem full and there's an empty car, do not get on the car because there's probably a homeless person in there that's disgusting and smelling up the car, or something worse if it's not a homeless person smelling up the car. That would be one. I mean, it used to be like, don't get on the last car. That was a dangerous one. People asking for money, try not to look them in the eyes. I don't know. I need more time to think about the homeless, or the subway survival guide.
Isn't it get on, sit down, shut up, take your ride, get off as fast as possible, and run home?
Well, and watch where you sit down so you don't stand in homeless urine or feces.
Yeah, honestly, it's not as bad anymore, although it's getting worse. Like, so I grew up in New York in the 80s. I was a kid, and that was one of the nice things about the movie is the movie felt very authentic and felt like of its time, especially like on the subway. I think some movies overdo it or don't quite get it, but I think it really does get it right. And it got much better, and now it's kind of slowly getting worse. Again, I think dealing with are not getting a handle on mental health and poverty. There's way more homeless people on the subways in the streets of New York over the last 5 to 8 years. It's gotten really bad. So yeah, you are kind of navigating that in the subways. Unfortunately, but it's still relatively safe now as compared to what it would have been about 20 years ago.
Kim, Arthur, and Sophie had a whirlwind relationship as a chance encounter on the elevator leads to some light stalking, some post-murder coitus, and a few loving strolls, and a complete lack of understanding what the fucking nut job from down the hall is doing in my apartment in the middle of the night. Were you buying the Arthur and Sophie relationship, or was it very Fight Club to you?
So after that subway scene, he runs into the bathroom and he starts dancing like Arthur Franklin or Murray Franklin, whatever his name is, as I guess his way of relaxing. It's like he's blurring the line between fact and fiction. And then you see him go into Sophie Zazie Beetz, place and just confronts her with a kiss, right? And I thought, something's not right here, right? They've only kind of talked to each other. She showed up at the comedy club. Like it wasn't really making sense to me, honestly. And I'm pretty perceptive. At least I like to think I am. It didn't click that this was all in his head. It didn't hit me until he's sitting there in the apartment and she comes out and she's shocked. And I just thought, holy crap. She was there for, the family issues, and she was there for the comedy, and it seemed like things were going quite well for some dumb reason. And then all of a sudden it was like, holy crap, I can't believe I bought into this. Like, wow. Okay.
How about you, Ryan? Did you buy the Sophie is Tyler Durden twist?
Quick question. Was the comedy club before or after he kind of just walks up and opens the apartment door and they hook up?
I think it was before. I want to say it was before.
Also, it was Pogo's, the comedy club that John Wayne Gacy was at, the psycho clown thing. So interesting little tidbit there.
Regardless, I right off the bat, my like spidey sense was triggered because I was like, okay, this seems off. Like he's not that confident even after, and I get it works well because it's like, that's the transformation. That's like the transformative moment, right? He kills them. That's where he's got a rush of adrenaline and where he's really turn that corner. So it makes sense that, and then you have that great scene in the bathroom. It makes sense that if he was going to have that confidence and if he was going to do that, it would be in that moment. I just don't know that, I can't imagine her reacting to his advance like that. And so I know in the moment I thought, okay, this seems off. Something's weird about it. And just throughout, like, she's a really good actress and she was so underused in all the scenes she was in that I just kept thinking, okay, this isn't real. Like that first scene was real, but everything else after that was like, yeah, this doesn't seem right. Like she's just barely there and they're barely using her. And so basically I got the Fight Club vibe like right away. And I thought they were playing with reality and what was going on. And we're kind of, it was set up early in the movie. It's set up that he does have these daydreams and fantasies. So once that was established, I feel like there are moments where almost any moment then can be a fantasy and then the lines of reality are blurred. But that moment was like, yeah, I don't buy it.
Yeah, I got some serious Malcolm Crowe Sixth Sense vibes from her that I was like, all right, she's there, but she's not really there. She's kind of giggling. I saw something funny about the Sixth Sense the other day that I'd be more pissed about the fact that I was dead and found out that I kept going to work than really helping the kid or anything else. IG, let's talk some Penny Fleck. She did seem slightly off, but one of the biggest reveals in the movie was Arthur might have been Thomas Wayne's son. So do you believe that she was delusional or crazy or became unstable after the rejection?
Well, I think maybe both, and some of the delusional and crazy might come from how she was treated when she was younger, because apparently she was in an abusive relationship with somebody and, beat the sanity out of her, so to speak, just did things to her to drive her to that level. And she had a job working for either Thomas Wayne himself or the Wayne family or Wayne Industries or something. And, they all have this whole thing where if you work for the Wayne Industries complex, your family. And so she kind of took that to heart. And it's like, if he knew how we were living, he would take care of us. And it's just one of those things where I think that it happens with some people who work for people that are like that are very wealthy or own a lot of things, that they believe that should things go really badly, they'll get taken care of. And the truth is just like in this movie, very seldom do they really get taken care of unless you're a very public tragedy like the three stockbroker bros.
Kim, going forward, would the future of DC be better if the Joker and Batman were half brothers?
Wouldn't that be an interesting little avenue to take? It would make so much sense of why there's, a lot of animosity between the two of them, and why that interaction at the gate with him, forcing the smile of little Bruce Wayne there would have caused some trauma to him, and why he felt that he needed to save the city, the world or whatever from, the likes of bad people. Do I think that that's the direction that they're going to end up taking on it? No, but I think that it would be, if there's a multiverse of, timelines available for DCU, that would probably be a really interesting take on it.
Penny has a stroke after Arthur finds out at Arkham that she and her boyfriend both abused him. He goes to the hospital and promptly smothers her with a pillow. As someone who comes from a background of abuse, IG, could you blame him, even if she stood complicit in his abuse, that he may lash out once he finds out about it?
Well, at this point in the movie, I believe that all of his services are taken away. His mother's been lying to him. Thomas Wayne has shut him down completely and punched him in the face. The entire world is crumbling around him. He's now shot people in the subway. Should he get caught or anything else lead into him, his whole life is over. And most of this is as a direct result of how his mother raised him and everything that she's gone through up to this point. She's lied to him and treated him unfairly and set him up to fail in life. And where's he got to go now? So, yeah, it's as much her fault as it is his own, and society's as a whole, that he develops this role in this place that he goes into. So while I'm never really a fan of matricide, go kill your mother because she's mean, because, I'm not a big fan of killing anybody if you can help it. I can see where that came from, and especially when he's suffering so badly from all of his stuff.
Ryan, Robert De Niro plays Murray Franklin, a Jay Leno type character. Or maybe, is it possible that the interview and the character was patterned after Joaquin Phoenix's very famous and cringe-inducing run-in with David Letterman back in 2010?
I'm sure there are elements of that in there, and I wouldn't be shocked if, I'm not sure. I would think that, I don't know when the script was written, and I don't know if Joaquin Phoenix was always the one that Todd Phillips wanted for this movie, but it does seem an interesting choice given the actor that they go with the talk show to be the setting, and I'm sure there were little hints thrown in there. I'd like to think it's more coincidence than it, because it's such an important part of the story that I'd like to think it was more coincidence than him actually writing it because of that awkward interview.
After being teased and taunted and preached to, the Joker pulls out a gun and shoots Murray to death live on television. He tells him, "You get what you fucking deserve." After somebody admits to killing 3 people in cold blood, are you going to sit there and kind of lecture him on right and wrong? Or are you going to get the hell out of the studio? And did Murray deserve it?
So after, realizing that Sophie wasn't actually his girlfriend, it took me a minute of sitting there and watching this particular scene because it too didn't feel like it was genuinely happening. Like, why would somebody just sit there and be that inquisitive, except for that's his actual job, is to interview people. This might be a once in a lifetime opportunity for him to get an on-air confession out of somebody, and possibly probe for more details or whatever. It was just very odd. And I know it was well rehearsed, the way Joker was sitting in his dressing room and I don't want to say, positioning his handgun and things of that nature. For me, it kind of felt like maybe all of this just kind of took place in his head. Maybe it didn't happen that way. The scene that happens immediately afterwards where he's, watching all of the different monitors and everyone on the news is all talking about it. It's the fame that he's always wanted. It was, infamy, and he was finally getting that. But did it actually happen, or was this all part of like a, psychotic breakdown that was just all happening inside of the Arkham Hospital?
It's interesting, too, because it kind of mirrored the coverage that a mass shooter does get for that short period of time before they cut it off. I don't feel that they would have showed a live execution on TV over and over again like we were seeing. The scene drove home because it almost felt like Murray was asking the Joker to shoot him. IG Charlie Pointer from Facebook wants to know, how do you feel about the change in the direction in Thomas and Martha Wayne's death? Does it have less impact knowing that it was one of the Joker's followers rather than the man himself?
Well, the man himself was just in Tim Burton's with Michael Keaton's Batman. It wasn't always the Joker. It was just that one time. So I don't take that as pure canon. Like it was just an alley thug trying to make some money in most incarnations of Thomas Wayne and his wife's death. So the fact that it's one of his thugs at that moment, I think, is impactful if they're going to use this stuff to create further stories going forward. But the thing is, I've heard that they're already not going to do a sequel of this, which maybe that means we're not going to get any more of a Joaquin Phoenix Joker, but maybe we are. And that remains to be seen, because the thing is, if we're going to get Joaquin Phoenix Joker, he's a middle-aged man now. And Bruce Wayne is like 10. Like, are we really going to run a senile, like old, wrinkly Joker out at the Batman when he comes of age and is out fighting crime? So the time frames are kind of messing with me a little bit, but the original question still stands. I don't think it really matters who kills Thomas Wayne. I don't think it matters how it happens exactly. They don't have to come out of the same play. They don't have to come out of the same place. It just has to happen in an alley in front of Bruce. And it happened. And so the story stays the same.
I would say it matters only in that because it's happening during. So I hope there isn't a sequel. I think this is great as it is. It's its own kind of Elseworlds. I don't need another movie. The whole idea for Batman is kind of, he's this billionaire who watched his parents die because of a no-name, nothing criminal. And that kind of is part of his motivation for then fighting crime, is fighting people like that, because that is the world, is a bunch of no-name, nothing criminals, defeating that. And obviously through that, he finds his rogues gallery and, and everything happens from there. But I think a lot of that motivation, comes from him being not connected to him and not important. I think because in this movie it is connected to the Joker, it's because he's the one that started this whole, or got, I guess, move the ball forward, that people are running around like clowns, that I would almost think that the child Bruce Wayne would, even though it wasn't the Joker that did it, if the Joker does become a known criminal, the Joker would then become kind of the object of his anger, and he would direct his efforts towards finding and killing the Joker rather than fighting crime. I don't know. I just kind of was thinking that through, that I don't know if this is great for Bruce Wayne's own origin. And I'm kind of glad that I think we'll only get this one shot and we're not going to have this as his, see this through.
Well, Kim, I call this the unreliable narrator issue. I love Westworld. We all love Westworld. We love talking about it. However, we never truly know what's going on because it's all depending on who's telling the story at that point. We don't know what's actually happening. And that's fine for a weekly serial show. However, to spend 2 hours and a bunch of money on a movie, does it disappoint you a little bit that the whole movie might have been part of Arthur's delusion?
No, not at all. One of the first previews that came on when we sat down at the theater was for the Harley Quinn movie that's going to be coming out next. And it makes sense that that's how they would kind of set this up, is that he's in a mental institution at this point in time. He's sitting down with a new psychiatrist or what have you. And Harley Quinn was a nurse. That's where she fell in love with him. You know, that's where the relationship began. So like I said earlier, this is a brick. It is a stone. It is a stepping path. It is the start of a whole new narrative for the direction that they're going to be taking these movies. And the next one that's going to come out is going to be the Harley Quinn narrative of how she kind of, comes into this picture. I don't think it's going to be the last that we actually see of, this particular narrative, to be honest with you. I don't. It got too much publicity, too much noise, and they need that right now. They need something that's going to be a moneymaker.
Well, Ryan, Todd Phillips says no sequels, no crossovers. It was a one-off. We're done. However, Joaquin Phoenix earlier in the week said he would be open to reprising the role after making almost $250 million on the opening weekend. Will we see him as the Joker again?
I want to say no. I just don't see how it works. As Ig said, I think, the world is set up where Bruce is 10 years old. So it's reimagined the Joker. So we could get a version of him that is in his 60s, 70s battling with Bruce. And then it's a different kind of Joker. The Joker's never been, a physical, too much of a formidable physical foe for Batman. It's the kind of chaos that he creates. That's what's been his kind of weapon. So I'm not as concerned about Batman facing off against an older Joker. I just think that, what are we going to age up Joaquin Phoenix? Are we going to wait 20 years or wait 10, 15 years
like they did in
do the movie?
And Aquaman with all the characters.
Yeah. So I mean, there's like, I'm not itching to see it because I think I thought what we got is perfect. I mean, it's great and it's a great story, and I don't need any more of it. I don't need to see him as the Joker, because I feel like it'll become him kind of hamming it up, and you lose what makes this movie so special and what makes it work by going with a sequel. So yeah, I'm just kind of like, I'm good. I hope we don't see him as the Joker again. He was phenomenal performance. Definitely up there with Heath Ledger in a different way, but like I don't need to see it again.
Well, you were always a big proponent for them to do one-offs, and I think that this might be the perfect movie to do that. And I think if you go back, you have an opportunity of ruining what you just did. Leave it to be what it is and move on to something else. And maybe if this works, maybe you do a different villain. Maybe you do maybe you do a Riddler movie, or maybe you do a Bane movie, and you keep placing these stones and just building these characters. Kim, the riots are taking place. The Joker's in police custody until he's rescued by his followers. He gets out and dances on a police car in front of the adoring masses as Gotham burns. Your thoughts on the movie and your rating?
I thought it was a 10. I absolutely loved it. This is probably the first time I'll ever give a DC movie a solid 10. I think it was hard hitting. I think the narrative of the entire storyline for me flowed really well. I was engaged with what was happening on screen. I thought the acting was brilliant. The cinematography of it was beautifully done. There's so many positive things that I can say about such a grim movie, which is difficult to do. It's easy to cut something down, but the shell and the bones of this entire film is just spectacular. It really, truly is. And I appreciate it for every ounce of what it's worth. I give it a 10.
There were 3 issues I had going into the movie that concerned me. I think for one, and this is not an original thought, but that I didn't think that we needed a Joker movie. Like the Joker is, as Mark Bernardin said, like he's an agent of chaos. He's a force of nature. You don't need to know where that came from or what that came from. You just need to know that it's coming, and it's coming in a certain direction, and it's gonna hit Gotham and screw screw everybody up, and then Batman's got to deal with it. And so I didn't see why we needed to know where that came from, because it's never been very important to the story. I think the other thing is that I like that his own origin has always been kind of vague, and you never quite know what his origin really is. Even in like a movie like The Dark Knight, where they touch on it, like it changes, and he is an unreliable narrator. And then the other part is just previous performances. We got great performances from Heath Ledger, from Jack Nicholson, from Mark Hamill, and we'll forget the dreadful Jared Leto version. But why have somebody do that again and try for that? And I was afraid that he might try to meet those. And so I think it really shockingly kind of overcame all of that. I think what was interesting is that they kind of deconstructed the idea of the Joker. You take this force of nature and agent of chaos, and we're able to deconstruct that. How do you get there? How does someone get there without a vat of chemicals? And I thought it was really brilliant the way they did that. You know, it's set up that he's already having issues, and then you take away the medication, and then a few things go wrong, and he snaps. And I like that. It stayed true to the origin of the Joker, in that he was still an unreliable narrative. He still had a vague history. You're not quite sure what's real and what's not. Like, some things are real, but I love that you have to sit and think about it. Like, what parts are you going to accept as really having happened? And then I think that what's great about this performance versus, let's say, Heath Ledger, is that Heath Ledger, he was the Joker, and he got to be the Joker the entire time. In this case, we saw him become that person. It compares, it's like apples and oranges. Like, they're both amazing, and I don't need to really compare them, because he's doing something completely different. We're seeing this broken man get broken down so much that he becomes this monster. So, I thought, I just loved those aspects of the movie. I thought the cinematography was amazing. It looked beautiful. I mean, as gritty and dirty and ugly as New York was, or Gotham was, it looked great. And growing up in New York in the 80s, it really felt real and felt like that. And as dark as it was very kind of colorful and vivid, and just a beautiful world that was built. I mean, I think that Joaquin Phoenix will definitely get nominated for an Oscar, and probably at this stage deserves to win. I think it was just great. The performance was just phenomenal physically. The way that he captured that character, the laughing fits that he would get into, the dancing, it was just all. He was kind of magnetic or mesmerizing. He just didn't want to stop looking at the screen when he was on it. And you consider, like, he had to have been in 90% of the movie, or 90% of the scenes, and he just carries it on his back. No matter what you think of the movie, I think his performance is amazing. So yeah, I give this a 9, on a good day, 9.5. Like, it's really a phenomenal movie. Great job. Can't wait to see it again. And yeah, great performances, great movie, great take on the Joker. I hope it's a one-off, and that's it.
And now for the time for the voice of reason on the Cinik Radio podcast. Now, this wasn't a bad movie. I'm not going to say that it was, but I don't know, a little self-gratiating. And it really, the biggest problem I have with it is, as far as DC villains go, there is none greater than the Joker. Lex Luthor's a close second, but I think the Joker's just got it all as far as DC villains go. And you basically wrote the Joker out of all possibilities of any kind of movies by putting a middle-aged man 20 years before we're going to have anybody to have him do anything with. So there's my first problem. Second problem is the pacing of this movie was it was a little off. These guys are like, oh, every moment was great, and, watch it again. Because it on second viewing, it may not be as great as the first one. Did Joaquin Phoenix do a great job of this movie? Absolutely. He acted his ass off in this movie, and I thought it was one of his best performances ever. Like, easily, I think, even better than Walk the Line, which he was also great in. That being said, I liked how it looked. I liked the setting. I liked that it was kind of running parallels to things happening in the world at the time, in our world, with the trash strike in the New York in the 80s, and typhoid running crazy and everything else going on that actually happened in our world. And they're running parallels in Gotham to that. It made it feel a little more real. But here's the thing. I don't generally always go to superhero movies for things to feel real. I don't go to comic book movies for things to feel real. I like the suspension of disbelief. And there just isn't enough of that in this movie. I like it, and it was good, but it wasn't where I believe it needed to be, and it didn't set things up for anything further. One-offs are great, but if you're gonna compete with Marvel, you got to come together and create something that you can build off of. You're not going to be able to put a Penguin movie, a Bane movie, a Riddler movie, or anything else and get anywhere near this because you took your top bad guy and used him up, and now you can't even put him in any further movies. So I liked it. I'm going to give it a 7.5, but I think they killed their own chances for anything further.
Well, who knows if they wanted anything further than that, but I mean, the movie had super rats. I have a problem with this unreliable narrator thing that they're doing in TV and movies now, because I like to know how things work. I want to know where the Joker came from. I want to know how the man became the crown prince of crime and what drove him to this. And I went into the theater with the hope that maybe I would find out that, even if it's not canon, even if they don't stick with it, it still would have made a more compelling story to me than watching somebody's daydream. But I looked at the movie more as societal and psychological, and this movie was an uncomfortable tale to tell. The decline of society, rich versus poor. People are angry, and I don't blame them, as certain people sleep on a pile of money every night and it grows daily. The others are denied access to medications because they're quote unquote too expensive, which were made that expensive by the rich themselves. Do I want civil unrest? No. Do I see it happening at some point? Most definitely. And this movie was a piece of art. It was beautiful. It was violent. It was raw, and it was amazingly acted. It shined the light on mental illness and how it's stigmatized. Let's be fair. Ledger's Joker will always be the best, but hats off to Joaquin Phoenix for putting in the performance of a career on an already impressive body of work. I give the Joker an impressed 9.0. The movie was necessary on many different levels.
And that's it. You made it to the end of another episode of the Cinik Radio podcast. I'm Igrihe, here with Cinik, who you can find at CINIKRADIO.com. Also, we had Ryan, who you can find at thejimwits.com, and Kim, who you can find at KMCArtworks.com. Great artists. Go check out some really cool stuff. We'll be back next week with some new stuff for you, probably some news as well. Send your crazy news stories, any comments, questions, and concerns to us at CINIKRADIO@gmail.com. Find us on the internet at CINIKRADIO.com. Look for us on Facebook at Facebook.com/CINIKRADIO. Find us on Twitter at CINIKRADIO, and find us on Instagram at CINIKRADIO. You can also head over to tpublic.com, search for Cinik, CINIK, and get your own Cinik Radio podcast gear. T-shirts, mugs, cups, stickers, all the cool Cinik Radio podcast stuff you could possibly want. It'd help the show, and we would greatly appreciate it. Thanks again for all the love and support. Keep listening, sharing it with your friends, like, listen, and subscribe. And until next time, don't get captured.
Follow the podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and at CINIKRADIO.com. Available for download on iTunes.